Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. It's been a little while, so welcome back to another edition of This Week with Mallory. It has been a really, really, really busy legislative session since Democrats took a Democratic trifecta here in Michigan and now control the state House, state Senate, and the governorship, which means that despite best intentions of us doing this live stream every single week, the Senate has been in session. It's been a little bit inconsistent, but we're back. We have updates to share with you, and welcome to people who may be new. A little bit of ground rules. I'm State Senator Mallory McMorrow. This is our live stream that streams across YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Coming soon, it looks like we'll be able to also stream across Instagram Live, but not quite yet. But welcome to everybody who's tuning in, no matter what platform you are on. This is live, so you will be able to go ahead and type questions into the comment section of whatever platform you're on. Although, given some of the tweaks with Twitter, I can't guarantee those questions on Twitter will get through to us. But if you are on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can go ahead and type questions into the comment section. We will be able to see them on our end and answer them. Friendly reminder, when you are typing a question or a comment, please put your name and the city that you live in case those things are not obvious from your username, so that we can make sure to address constituent questions and concerns first. And with that, we will go ahead and dive right into the updates. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. I was hoping these side-by-sides would be a little bigger so you could actually see me, but we're going to roll with it. Okay, Lansing update. In our first 100 days, so we took office on January 21st of this year. So we have just passed the first 100 days of our legislative session, and we have done a lot here in Michigan. On day one, in both the State House and the State Senate, we announced our legislative agenda together. That consisted of all of these things. And what is incredible is that in the first 100 days, we have accomplished every single one of these things on our list. So in the first 100 days in the legislature in Michigan, we have rolled back the retirement tax. This was a tax that Governor Snyder put on seniors who were on a fixed income back when he was governor. And he did that largely to be able to afford a $1.8 billion tax cut for big corporations. So this is something that many of us on both sides of the aisle, frankly, have heard concerns from seniors for many years that if you are already on a fixed income and you were already in retirement, losing up to $1,000 a year was a huge hit. So we have repealed that. That is number one. We have also expanded the EITC, otherwise known as the Working Families Tax Credit, up from 6% of the federal value to 30% of the federal value. This is going to lift thousands of families out of poverty. It's really, really meaningful. It's going to make a huge impact. Now, one note here is, unfortunately, the way our legislature works is we need 2/3 of votes in the Senate to get what is called immediate effect. So when we pass a bill into law, it can either go into effect immediately or when the bill is issued. If we do not get those 2/3 vote to grant a bill immediate effect, it does not go into effect as a law until 90 days after the end of a legislative session, what is called sine die. So given we have narrow majorities in both the State House and the State Senate, there's only a 2-seat Democratic majority in the Senate. That means we need 6 Republicans to vote along with us to give something immediate effect. And unfortunately, Republicans did not come on board to support this working family tax credit expansion in immediate effect. So it will not go into effect for those who, hopefully you filed your taxes, because tax day just passed, but we were starting to get questions from some people as to whether or not that would go into effect this year. Unfortunately, it did not. Kristen McDonald-Rivet, who is a state senator out of the Midland Bay City area, has introduced legislation to bring that date of effect up, but that is still ongoing. So that will go into effect 90 days after the end of our 2-year legislative term. All right, what else have we done? We have amended the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to finally explicitly prohibit discrimination against LGBTQ Michiganders. Believe it or not, it was still completely legal within the bounds of our state Civil Rights Act to discriminate against somebody who is LGBTQ in housing, in employment, and in public accommodations. And although the Supreme Court has recently ruled that sex is inclusive of gender identity and orientation, what we have learned, and if the Dobbs decision taught us anything, it is that court rulings are not permanent. So we needed to make sure that our law reflects the current reality. And this was a really, really moving moment in the legislature to be able to finally include LGBTQ Michiganders so that you cannot be denied housing just because of who you are. You cannot be fired from a job just because of who you are. Just really, really moving to recognize that for so many of our friends, neighbors, you finally have the same rights and protections that many of us have enjoyed our entire lifetime. So really huge step forward for Michigan. We also repealed the outdated 1931 abortion ban. Voters here in Michigan voted overwhelmingly to pass Prop 3 in 2022, which guarantees abortion and reproductive rights in our state constitution. So we still had this 1931 law on the books that explicitly banned abortion, as well as educational pamphlets about reproductive rights and medications. This is called a zombie law. So it is a law that is still on the books, even though it is unenforceable because it was at odds with what is now in our state constitution with Prop 3. However, again, if we've learned anything in recent history with the Dobbs decision, these things have to align. So courts may change, the Constitution may be amended. We wanted to make sure that this law was taken off the books once and for all so that we are never in a situation like we were last year, where Michigan was at risk of this archaic law going back into effect, which would have caused absolute chaos for so many people in this state, with complicated pregnancies, and so on and so forth. So great news, zombie law gone. We did it. We also restored worker rights to negotiate for safer workplaces and fair pay by repealing so-called right to work, and restoring prevailing wage. This is something that was a long time coming. Thank you so much to all of our friends in labor for continuing to advocate, continuing to support us. And again, just a really moving day at the Capitol to see so many people who were quite literally locked out of their state capital during the Snyder administration, during lame duck, when right to work was initially passed. That you were welcomed in. You were welcomed back into your state capital. And it was just, you could kind of hear the applause echoing throughout the Capitol, which was really wonderful. And it makes Michigan the first state in, I believe, 58 years to repeal so-called right to work. So huge. What we know is that while proponents of right to work argue that it makes the state more competitive, what we actually know is it brings wages down, and does nothing to make a state more competitive. When you look at the things that companies rank when they're thinking about where to locate or expand, right to work never even makes the top 10. So had to go. All right. Next, we have passed serious, meaningful gun violence prevention reform bills. This is something that a number of my colleagues and myself have been working on for years, as well as colleagues well before us. So I've made note, Robert Wittenberg, our current Oakland County treasurer, was a state representative. He started the first gun violence prevention caucus, I believe 7 or 8 years ago, when there were only maybe 4 or 5 members that were a part of this caucus. He introduced legislation like extreme risk protection orders when it was really, really unpopular, and it was an uphill battle because he believed that it was the right thing to do. Now, many years later, with this new majority, we have passed 3 things. We have passed legislation to require universal background checks on all firearms purchased, to require the safe storage of firearms when they are not in use if you live with a minor, to make sure that a child cannot get access to a firearm. And finally, my bill to enact extreme risk protection orders made its final passage out of the Senate this week and now heads to the governor's desk for her signature. That was a lot. That was a lot that we've done in the first 100 days. And as this graphic said, we are just getting started. So what's next after all of that? We're looking forward to the final red flag bills being passed out of the state house. There are 4 bills in the package to create and enact red flag laws, otherwise known as extreme risk protection orders. So we will keep everybody posted on the final steps there and as they head to the governor's desk to be signed into law. So, where do we go from here? We go right into the budget process. As you can see from this graphic, the budget process is year long and so long that it doesn't even fit on the page. So, what we have to shift into, you saw a lot of policy moving over the first few months and all of those things that I listed. But a huge part of the legislator's role is to pass the state budget. This is a state of 10 million people. We have budgets anywhere from 75 to 90 billion dollars. Michigan is now sitting on a fairly significant surplus due to federal COVID relief funds, federal funds from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as state revenue surplus dollars because Michigan actually recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic much stronger than I think many economists anticipated. So, this schedule lays out what the budget timeline looks like so that people understand how the budget process works. So, in January, you see the governor's state of the state address is delivered. And then in February, the governor presents her budget proposal. This was the first meeting to the appropriations committee. The governor basically comes in and says, here is my vision for a budget for the state. And that is kind of the first flag planted on priorities. And it gives the legislature something to respond to. So from March, April, May, into June, this is the bulk of the budget work. So the way that the budget works is you have appropriations committees in both the state house and the state senate, and then you have appropriations subcommittees. There are budgets for MEDC and LEO. There are budgets for corrections. There are budgets for the Department of Health and Human Services. There are departments for education, the school aid fund. All of these individual committees work on their own budgets, and then they pass out budget recommendations that goes to the full appropriations committees. And then the same process is happening in the state house. So the Senate and the House are working side by side, going through this full process. Then they come into what is called conference committee, where it is a conference. The two chambers are working together to come to a negotiation between everything that has been decided in both chambers. And then both chambers agree. They set an agreement from the conference committee on what our budget is, and that budget goes to the governor. The governor has the ability to sign the budget as is. She can veto the budget, or she can do what we've seen sometimes over the past few years, line item veto of specific items within the budget. And that process all wraps up based on the state constitution by October 1st. However, a few years ago, in 2019, we passed legislation on ourselves to try to get our budgets done by July 1st. And this, while it is not constitutionally required, it is something that many of our school groups and our administrators were pushing really hard because that is the beginning of the process for their fiscal year planning for the school year ahead. So our hope this year, we are working fast and furiously to get this done for July 1st. But what that means, if you're not super into the budget process, is that you will likely see less policy moving because all of the legislators are working on the budget process in the spring and the summer. So you will see lighter work on policy, and then you will probably see more policy work back in the fall after the budget has been passed and signed so that the state can keep functioning into the next year. Now, as part of my work outside of the budget and some policy work, I am also the chair of the Senate Committee on Economic and Community Development. Many of you may have been hearing headlines on these very, very large dollar amounts that have gone to things like a battery plant for Ford in Marshall. And we know that right now, Michigan is at a very unique place. In that we are a rapidly aging state. This is actually not very unique. This is something that a lot of states are sharing. In 2020, our population declined. We had more people die in the year 2020 than we had born. And we have a real challenge. I know that a lot of our employers in Metro Detroit have been saying to me for years that we have a lack of talent. We need to make sure that more of our people are getting post-secondary degrees. Michigan is a place where so many people built middle-class lives. without requiring a college degree. This is something that we're known for, and we have to do both while we are simultaneously trying to fight to keep those good union jobs where you can have a great middle class life without necessarily needing a college degree. What we know is that more and more jobs require some kind of post-secondary certificate. And we also know that we need to attract and retain more people in the state of Michigan. We had an economist come in front of my committee at the beginning of the term and said if every single childbearing age woman were to get pregnant at the same time in the state of Michigan, we would still not replace our workforce. Not going to lie, it felt like a little bit of a personal attack, but that is the reality that we're facing. That if we want our seniors to be able to retire and sell their homes and downsize, then we need to make sure there are more workers, more people coming into the workforce to take their place. All of these things are connected. So I am really proud to be leading a new work group in the Senate with some of my colleagues on reforming our approach to economic development so that we can be more holistic. Maybe there's less of a reliance on some of these big ticket incentive projects so that we can do more of the things that are going to make companies want to come here and expand here. Many of you may remember the Amazon HQ2 exercise from around 2017 when Amazon was looking to create a new headquarters. They were competing with states all over the country, and Michigan had prepared a $4 billion incentive package between the state and the city of Detroit, and Windsor, actually. Canada was involved in this process. And we still didn't even crack the top 20. And Amazon told us it's because we didn't have the talent and we didn't have public transit. So when you see where they won in Northern Virginia, part of the package in Northern Virginia was a still very large incentive, but also an expansion of a new campus of Virginia Tech in Northern Virginia and expanded public transit in the area. And why that holistic approach is important is because the tech industry right now has taken a downturn. So Amazon has recently announced that they are pausing the development of that site in Northern Virginia, but the campus of Virginia Tech is up and running, and they've expanded public transit. So this, to me, is a more holistic approach that I hope we can get to in Michigan so that we are utilizing economic development as an engine to invest in ourselves. So much more to come on that, but the work group is getting together for the first time next week to get rolling. All right, last but not least, before we get into questions, we want to share good news from the district. Oh my gosh, a photo of me in person at an event. This was incredible. So this was our first town hall. We had it at Royal Oak High School, the first town hall of the term. And believe it or not, I was reflecting on this, and this was the first town hall we'd had in person since before the COVID-19 pandemic. The last town hall that I held, it was so sweet looking back on it at the time. We called it 2020 101. And it was everything you would possibly want to know about 2020. We talked about the changes to election law. We talked about the upcoming election. We talked about the census. What we did not talk about was the COVID-19 pandemic because we did not see it coming. So it was really exciting to be back in person. We will take this town hall to Detroit next. We'll be moving around the district. And because it's a new term, we talked about, yes, a legislative update, but also just kind of did a state government 101 so that you know how your state government works, what your legislator can and cannot do, how a bill becomes a law, and how you can better advocate with your legislator. So look out for more in-person town halls to come. We had almost 100 people attending this first one, a ton of great questions, and it was just really great to be back in person. We also saw some requests here online to do a digital version of the town hall. So we will either look to record the next in-person one, or we can do it right here on a live stream. So more to come. We'll figure out what the digital version looks like. Next up, this was great. Senator Jeremy Moss and I both attended the Birmingham Board of Education meeting this Tuesday to check in with our newly redistricted communities. I say newly redistricted with the full, just Senator Moss and I have been trying to get to this meeting every month since we took office, but every night that the Birmingham School Board meeting has fallen, we've still been in session late in Lansing. So we finally made it in month 4. It was really exciting to be there. And we were there it's such a wonderful time. There were so many student recognitions. We celebrated the swim team. We celebrated arts and culture students. It was just really wonderful. And again, great to be back in person. And got a couple of pictures with BPS award winners, which is always just really exciting. I'm just so proud of all of these kids. And Senator Moss is a Birmingham Schools graduate himself. So always a proud moment for him to come back to his home turf. All right. Last but certainly not least, this week I visited Baldwin House, a senior living facility in Birmingham, where we discussed the need for affordable, reliable housing. And if you haven't seen the news, this community is leading an effort to push on the local level, starting in the city of Birmingham, right to renew legislation that would basically grant tenants of a place exactly what it sounds like, the right to renew your contract. This effort is actually being led by a woman, Dorothy, who was the mayor of Birmingham many years ago. She now lives at Baldwin House, and she's very concerned that she may lose her housing. She pointed out in our meeting that when you get a housing contract, there are many stipulations in there that can tell you why you would lose your housing, why you would be evicted, but nothing that guarantees you the right to renew your own lease. So we'll keep you posted. We'll be checking in with my colleague, Senator Jeff Irwin, who leads the Housing Committee in the Senate. I know it's something that he has been looking at as well on the state level, and we will share updates as we have them. But this was a great example of citizens coming together. What I shared with this group is, as legislators, we bring our own lived experience and some of our expertise to the table, but you are experts in your own lived experience every day. So by them sharing this experience with me, I can better advocate for them. And we always like to look to see what's happening in local municipalities. Ann Arbor has already explored a right to renew ordinance on the local level. So this may be something in various municipalities that we look at that can then bubble up to the state level where we can take a look at it statewide. We also talked about persistent scams that are aimed at seniors and how you can protect yourselves. You may, I mean, I'm getting them, but you may be getting a lot of scam phone calls, text messages, and they often look very authentic. Scammers have the ability to kind of ghost a phone number. So you may get a phone call that looks like it's from Beaumont. It says Beaumont, but you pick up and they're asking for your social security number. So what I advise the group here, never, ever, ever give out your social security number over the phone. No state department will ever call you and ask for your social security number over the phone. If you get a mailer that you have to proactively call and potentially share that information, that's one way, but nobody's going to randomly call you and ask for your social security number. Our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, has done a lot of work on senior scams and elder abuse. She also does a great elder abuse and senior scams town hall, which we would love to bring into the community, and we will keep you posted as we have more information about that. It's something that every time I've been a part of it, attendees really enjoy and learn a lot. Finally, we heard concerns about continued Medicaid and Medicare coverage during the COVID-19 pandemic. Federal guidelines allowed many more people to access Medicare and Medicaid. Right now, because the federal government has officially declared the COVID-19 pandemic over, that means a lot of these rules are no longer in effect. We're coming back to the pre-pandemic rules. This means that you may be getting a mailer if you were on Medicare or Medicaid that you have to reply and submit your information. There are thousands of people who are still eligible to receive Medicare and Medicaid, but because the rules went back into effect, you need to respond to this mailer confirming some information so that you do not lose your healthcare coverage. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That was our update from the district, and I am going to go ahead and bring on our Chief of Staff, Emily, who will moderate questions. So this is a good point. Reminder, if you have any questions, comments, please go ahead and type them in the comment section. If your name is not immediately obvious by your username, please let us know your name too and what city you live in, and go ahead and fire away with questions.
So as of right now, we don't have any in the comments. Lots of statements of support, which we love. Also, just a reminder that we're at the state level, and so federal questions we're not necessarily able to get into, which maybe as you wait, we can, re-up just sharing a little bit about the difference there. But so far, no questions. So feel free again to post on the comments with your question and where you're from, and we'll get to you.
Awesome. We'll do last call for questions, comments. I do see some comments, people saying hello. Hello. I'm scrolling through really quickly. I see somebody from Big Rapids tuning in, thanking for a vote on a project over there. Thank you for letting us know. That was a tough vote. Some of these things become really political and contentious. I have certainly been on the receiving end of conspiracy theory driven attacks, but it's good to get that feedback and know that that was seen and supported. So thank you.
Okay. I have a question from Marcia Hilliard. What can the excess COVID funds be used for? Which I think we've talked about before. So this will be a good refresh.
That's great. Yeah, Marcia, great question. So anytime we as a state receive federal dollars, this is kind of just a good explainer. So you may see news that the federal government votes to, whether it's COVID relief or the Inflation Reduction Act or the bipartisan infrastructure law on the federal level, they pass out a bunch of money and then it comes back into the states. What a lot of people may not know is that money doesn't go into the community until the legislature appropriates it. So that is the step. It comes to our state legislature, and then we have to go through our process to basically decide where that money goes and how it gets spent. And it doesn't get into the community until we take that step. So the COVID-19 relief money, there are oftentimes with any of these buckets of money, there are kind of rules and guidelines for how we can use them. So through our appropriations process, we are going through all of the federal funds, like I said, whether it's COVID or infrastructure or elsewhere, to understand how we can use these funds, and then figuring out in each of those individual budgets where we can put those federal dollars in a way that makes sense. So some of the COVID-19 relief dollars can go towards increasing nursing home staff pay, helping people return to work. There was still some of the kind of education HVAC monies that were in some of the COVID-19 dollars. So it all has rules, and then it's on us to kind of go through all the rules and figure out between all of our state tax dollars and our federal tax dollars, how we can put it all into our budgets to make it work to fund the things that we need to fund.
Great. And we have a question from Ann Perry. You mentioned looking at Prop A in Headley in a town hall recently. Thank you for coming, Ann. What do you see as a better solution that could still help protect seniors who are in their homes on fixed incomes? Thanks.
And that's a great question. And one that I wish I had a really easy answer to. This is one of those situations where, again, I am an expert in the work of my committees. And I really rely on my colleagues who are working more diligently on these issues. So we can take some concerns back. I know we've been talking about Headley and Prop A for years and years and years. And for those watching who may not necessarily know what this is, there was legislation passed, well-intentioned, many years ago, that would really peg your property taxes to the rate of inflation, which makes sense, right? You don't want exorbitant property taxes to make housing more affordable. But when we saw the recession, property values plunged. So if you're in a community where we've really recovered, property values have recovered, but you're still pegged only to kind of that rate of inflation or coming up from where we were, local communities are really struggling. And it has created a situation where we have many seniors who are living potentially in single family homes, and they want to retire or they want to downsize, but it becomes more expensive in terms of your tax burden to sell your single family home that maybe you've lived in for decades, say 40, 50 years, to get an apartment, because it's higher taxes on a new apartment than the taxes on your existing home, which is creating a whole host of issues. It is creating kind of a tightening of our housing stock. So there are less affordable homes available on the market for maybe young families or people trying to buy their first home. We also have seniors who are really struggling to maintain their homes, because if you no longer need a single family home, if you're living by yourself, then that's a squeeze that we're in right now. So, Anne, great concern and flag. We'll bring it back and see what some of our colleagues who are working on housing issues, if there are any solutions on the table, especially as we get into budget season. But please know that Prop A and Headley are still on the radar for us to work on, and to, if you have any ideas, if there's anything coming out of our local governments that you see that is working, please let us know, because we're also happy to lift up any best practices from our locals.
Thank you. We have a couple questions. I do want to answer this one because I think it's a nice one. Callie Graham, who's actually in Colorado, but she wants to know, she says, I would love to know, how do I get to where you are so I can create change where she's living?
Ooh, Kelly. Man, I wish we had all day. So I've learned a lot in this, and I think something that, if you're in Colorado, you may not know, is that even a few years ago, I was not in this line of work. I did something totally different. I was really frustrated with my government and watching everything that was happening, and I Googled how to run for office. So I say all of that to say anybody can learn how to do anything. I just jumped right in, and I learned a lot along the way. Something that I really advise to a lot of people, you may look around right now and just be overwhelmed with how many issues it seems like there are on. You turn on the news and it's just one thing after another, whether it's environmental concerns or clean water or gun violence or, reproductive rights, whatever it is you're concerned about. And that can lead to mission paralysis. It can feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much wrong. I don't feel like I can do anything. So something that I advise a lot of people is pick one issue that you really love. And I intentionally say love because that you're going to need to show up a lot. So you might be angry about a lot of things, but being angry and staying angry can be exhausting. But if you really love, I'm going to use gun violence as the example. You love your kids. You love their teachers. You want them to be safe when they go to school. You want them to be safe when they go to your friend's house. That is going to inspire you to continue to show up and advocate. The good news is that there are groups that exist who already do this advocacy work. So pick your one issue and then find a group that already has people who are doing this work. There are groups like Moms Demand Action that you can sign up and join. And I say do that in person because I firmly believe nobody in the history of the world has ever changed their mind on an issue in the comments section on Facebook. So put your phone down, stop doom scrolling, find a group and show up in person. A lot of advocacy takes time and consistency. It's not going to happen all at once. It's not going to be a form email that you're going to send online or a bunch of form emails. But if you show up and show up and show up consistently, you can make real change. And I firmly believe if each of us were to do that, if we all picked our one issue and we found our group, then we would be okay. So go for it. You're going to do amazing things. And thank you for asking the question.
We have a question here. This is one I'm not sure about the answer to. Jake Nayer, I hope I'm saying your name right, Jake.
Oh, hi, Jake.
Is the state still enforcing Medicaid work requirements? And if so, are there conversations around repeal?
I don't believe so, but we will double check and get back and talk about it in our next live stream. And Jake, we can shoot you a note too, because time is really messing with me. I remember this coming up and I feel like we went through the debate and we didn't renew Medicaid work requirements, but I will confirm.
Yes. And Jake,
I know there's talk about introducing Medicaid work requirements on the federal level. So House Republicans in Congress recently introduced their budget, which includes Medicare and Medicaid work requirements. It will not go through the U.S. Senate. We know that that's the case. But there is absolutely no research that backs up the idea that requiring work to receive Medicaid. I mean, Medicaid is healthcare for some of our most low-income, most vulnerable residents. Requiring work to get that healthcare, if you have terminal cancer and you can't get healthcare because of this work requirement, I mean, it's just devastating. So I believe we let it expire, but we will confirm and make sure to follow up. And this is a good plug for, I'm going to throw a graphic up on screen because I remembered how to do this. Please go to our website and sign up for our email newsletter, and we can be sure to follow up and put information in there. And it's here.
Yep. There you go. Yeah.
Great.
And then Jake, if you use that to reach out to us, we will get in touch with you. That way we have your info and we can follow up on your question. Thank you. As of right now, I don't have any more questions in here. So I would say last call. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Emily, I'm going to let you go. Thank you, everybody. We hope to do these on a more regular basis. Thank you for the grace of working with us as we have gotten up and running with this new term. It has been incredibly busy, but in a really rewarding way. So we want to make sure we're staying in touch, letting you know what's going on with that. Hopefully, we've had our last April snowstorm in Michigan, and we're going to move on to spring. So I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for tuning in. If you found this helpful, please share with your friends so we can stay in touch, and we will see you next time.